Where are the free speech warriors today? The hypocrisy is obvious to the American people. You are showing who you all are, really.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Omar will not be silenced.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Congressman Omar,
the gentlewoman's time has expired.
That our country is failing you today through this chamber. You belong.
The gentlewoman is no longer recognized, and the gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Don't tell me that this is about a condemnation of anti-Semitic remarks when you have a member of the Republican caucus who has talked about Jewish space lasers and an entire amount of tropes, and also elevated her to some of the highest committee assignments in this body. This is about targeting women of color in the United States of America. Don't tell me, because I didn't get a single apology when my life was threatened. Thank you.
My colleagues, I stand before you as a proud Jew. And my colleagues, I stand
I don't know why it
before
rebooted
you
there.
as a proud Jew.
People, this is government.
And a proud friend and colleague of Ilhan Omar. I don't need any of you to defend me against anti-Semitism. My friend Ilhan Omar.
Isn't that just what AOC was just doing 2 seconds ago by calling other? The incongruity of all of this. Hold on, I'll let it finish before I.
We have worked together to the values that I treasure as an American Jew and that she treasures. My colleagues, I stand.
Okay, we're going to end that. Look, this has nothing to do with what we're going to be talking about tonight, but I figured it might be the only moment of levity that we're going to have the entire evening. Levity through insanity. I mean, listening to that, if anybody watches those individuals, and they were not the only ones, but they were by far the worst that I saw. If anybody watches those three individuals and looks at the government and sees anything less than unhinged hypocrites, we're watching the same screen, but appreciating two different films. And I prefer my analysis to yours. Incidentally, just so we're all clear, they're talking about removing Ilhan Omar from the House Intelligence. No, it was the House Foreign Affairs Committee. It's an attack on women of color, people. All three of those women that you saw blowing their gaskets, throwing conniption fits, all three of them voted Marjorie Taylor Greene off of her House committee functions. But that's different with a capital D. But I know this is not intended to be about politics tonight. It's not intended to be about government, although it is, because just bear in mind the three lunatics that we just witnessed right there, they are in the government, and they may not be the worst, but they're pretty much tied with all the other members of government. And that's a bipartisan critique, by the way. Like there's some that are better than others, but that's the government. Those are the people that are governing you, me. Well, I'm from Canada, but I'm living here now, so those are the people that are governing us. Plato or Aristotle or Socrates, I forget whom, said, the price for not getting involved in politics is you end up being governed by your inferiors. Okay, and we are indeed being governed by our inferiors. Now, let me just make sure that we are actually currently live on Rumble. The Sunday night stream, Viva Barnes Law, is going to be tomorrow night because Barnes is in transit. Probably the same thing for next week because it's the Super Bowl and some people are still into that. Tonight, we've got a guest, someone who I'm going to interview, someone we're going to talk to, because I ran a poll in my Twitter sphere last week. Who knows who Maggie Garay is? Like, just unloaded, open question. Who knows? People know who Tiffany Dover is, although I'm not sure how many would have answered yes or no to that question. Maddie Garay. Who knows? The poll got 25,000 respondents, give or take. 75% of the respondents in my Twitter sphere did not know who Maddie Garay is, which I found to be not shocking in a judgmental sense, surprising in an educational, informative sense. Like, we're all heavily involved in what's been going on for the last 3 years. And to be as heavily involved as some of us are, emotionally invested, politically invested, spiritually invested, to not know who Maddie Garay is, that will have to be remedied, and we're gonna start tonight. So I've been watching interviews with Stephanie Garay. This is Maddie Garay's mother. A few of them over the weekend, reviewing a lot of the paperwork evidence that Stephanie sent me over the weekend. Maddie Garay was one of the children involved in the Pfizer clinical trials back in December 2020. Maddie Garay, according to Stephanie and according to medical records, suffered what can only be definitively concluded to be an adverse reaction in the clinical trials. And how Pfizer, how the clinical trial, whomever was taking care of that, dealt with this, everything about this is going to shock your conscience. And why is it so important? Imagine if at a time when we get locked down 2 weeks to flatten the curve in March 2020, and miraculously by December 2020, government scientists have managed to find a vaccine for a coronavirus within 9 months, when they had yet been able to decode this mystery for decades. I think decades is not an exaggeration. And they did it with a brand new technology that had never been used before. Ask Albert Bourla himself. mRNA technology, messenger RNA technology, in 9 months. And they run clinical trials. And imagine what would have happened had they had to deal with potential alleged adverse events in those clinical trials. Imagine what would have happened to vaccine intake had the story of Tiffany Dover, one of the nurses who apparently had something of a fainting reaction, if you believe one narrative, or much worse if you believe another. Imagine what that would have done to global vaccine intake. Imagine what would have happened there, if you want to just put your tinfoil hats on for a bit. And so what happened? Well, we know what happened with Tiffany Dover. NBC, whatever, one of those crap news networks, did a 5-part podcast miniseries, which raises more questions than answers. But the fact that people don't know who Maddie Garay is, you'll be shocked. Okay, so what's going to happen now? I'm bringing in Stephanie. I see her in the background. That's her mother. And I told Stephanie beforehand, I ask a ridiculous amount of questions. None of them are intended to be nosy, intrusive, the opposite of exhibitionist, whatever that is. None of it is intended to be crass, disrespectful, or exploitive. I ask a lot of questions, and I'm going to, because I've listened to some interviews and I know which questions I would have asked and want to ask. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So, Stephanie, I'm bringing you in 3, 2, 1. All right. Stephanie, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
As
good as can be.
We're going to leave it like this. Yeah, no, I every time I listen to, you sent me some material and I hear people ask you, how are you doing? Or how are you? Under the circumstances and knowing. Okay, we're going to start from the very, very beginning of all of this. I've given the 30,000-foot overview. Who are you? Your husband, family, where are you from? What do you do in life? We're not going to go too far into it because it's not irrelevant, but, leading up to December 2020, who are the Garays?
So we live in the outskirts of Cincinnati, Ohio, very close to Cincinnati Children's, which has always been regarded by everybody around here as like an elite hospital. I previously was an electrical engineer and had left that industry. I worked in industrial automation just because I traveled a lot, wanted to spend more time with my kids. This was before COVID. And started subbing and ended up being an educational assistant with special ed in an elementary school. My husband was a medic in the Army, went to nursing school, but because of my job, traveled around, ended up only getting his LPN because you can't hop around colleges, mess that up from LPN. Right. So he also was a project manager prior to that. So what he does right now is a combination of his medical side and his project management side. So he does a lot of analytics for the company that he works for right now in their medical department. We have three kids. Right now, my oldest, Gabe, is 18. Our middle son, Lucas, is 16, and Maddie is now 14.
Okay. So all that to say, suffice to say, educated, working parents.
Normal, boring people.
Since I'm not sure, I've been to Ohio, but I've only very briefly. I think, my brother once upon a time went to Oberlin back when it was crazy back in the day. Only to have gotten more crazy. Okay, so I mean that's enough of the backdrop of the family wise. So timeline in this entire story it's crucial, but it's also somewhat complicated.
Hmm.
How did you and the family get involved in the clinical trials for we're going to call it the jab. I'm not calling it the V
Right.
word.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in this?
So back in, I guess it was July or August of 2020, I found out one of our friends who worked for Cincinnati Children's was in the trial. And at that time, I myself signed up. And I had sent you the emails confirming that. I didn't realize at the time, but it was actually, there were two different trials that I ended up signing up for. One was the AstraZeneca and the other was Pfizer. I never got called in for either of them. I just assumed that, they had too many people that volunteered. I don't know. I'm assuming with the AstraZeneca one that it just got stopped because they no longer, like they didn't even release it in the US. So I had also sent you the email that I sent to my husband saying, hey, and I don't want to call out the person because I don't want to blame that person. It's just like ties everything together. So I said, hey, this, our friend is in the trial. It looks like low risk. She had already gotten both doses, didn't have any issues, was confirmed that she had gotten the actual jab. And I said, it looks like low risk, high reward. Because my kids, for me, it was getting us out of the pandemic. And I know a lot of people criticize me for not doing my research, but there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of research out there. And it was being preached that this was our way out of the pandemic. My kids were suffering from, like, they hated being home and not being able to see their friends. So that happened. Fast forward to December, and my son came
Well,
home.
actually,
Okay.
let me stop you there. So this is, I guess when they announced the clinical trials, it was give or take, I forget the month, but it's shortly before December of 2020.
For the 12 to 15-year-old trials, yes, not for the adult trials. They were earlier.
And
Right.
now, like, just to explain to us what was your living experience like during COVID itself? The world gets locked down in March 2020.
Right.
What are your kids doing? Your kids at the time now
Mhm.
are do the math.
Online learning. I mean, I was working at a school. Well, actually, at the time I was subbing, so I no longer. We all were home. Everybody was at home. My son, even when Maddie got her second dose, it was his 16th birthday, and there was no party because people were afraid to have a party. So I mean, we were at home. We tried to have fun. We did lots of things together. But you know what? My kids were 12, 14, and 15 at the time when they entered the trial. And that's like their teenage years. Like, it's so important at that time for them to be social. And they worked around it. They played online video games and did things like that to get around it. But still, it's like you need that social interaction face to face, and people just couldn't. You couldn't do it. They were miserable. Every kid was miserable. I work in an elementary school, and I see how it's affected kids. Every kid. I don't care who it is. They need that. They lost out on that. This is like destroyed our kids. So for me, it was a way out of this to say, hey, the way they presented it to us, hey, once you have this, you're safe. So once you're safe, you can go out and have a life.
And I'll field one question that I know you get, which is, to the how could you have done this type question.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say one thing, like when I was growing up, and you always hear these, they're not called clinical trials, but in Montreal, I forget what they were called. You'd hear the ads on the radio, participate in a test, and you'll get paid whatever. And it's money on the one hand, but not really.
It's not a lot of money.
No, I know, but
yeah.
and you operate on the basis, and I'll never do that again, that well, what's the worst that can happen? This is not like testing in the sense of like that facility in Japan during World War II. It's not like random, just let's random experiment on humans. You take for granted that you're within a realm of safety to begin with, and that the adverse effects are going to be headache, sore arm, fatigue, and whatever. And we're going to get into what they told you. So to those who say, how could you? I think a lot of us operated in a world where we presumed a lot more good faith, and we presumed a lot more transparency than we'll ever do again. And the tragedy is that some have to suffer to show us this reality that, my goodness, you know, what they tell you and what the reality is are two very different things.
Right.
So, you know, so after now it's like 9 months of lockdown, whatever, you find out that they're doing the trials on the kids because they had done the adult trials earlier.
Mm-hmm. And we had a friend that was in the trial and she had no issues. And I guess, so first of all, I never would have considered putting my kids in any trial ever. This was the first time they ever were in one. And I did not even ask them to be in it. I volunteered myself earlier on. The same parent had her son participate in the trial for 12 to 15-year-olds. And he was talking about it at school. My son came home and he said, hey, X, and I don't want to say his name, is in the COVID jab trial, you know, and I want to do it too. So for him, it was his ticket out to have a life. And a bunch of him and his friends, they all were in the trial. So I knew an adult in the trial and I assumed, hey, if somebody got injured by this by now with the adult trial, because there were a lot of people in the adult trial, that we would have known by now. That's what I assumed. So this was not a small, like in Cincinnati, Ohio, there were a lot of adults and kids that were in this trial. Okay. So it wasn't like one of those small satellite locations. And this was somebody that was very well respected, educated, that was in the trial, put her son in it. She has a special needs child. So like she did her, like I assumed she did her homework and she probably did, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, he came home, asked about it. I sent you the email that she had sent to my husband saying, hey, X said that Lucas wanted to be in the trial. Here's the information. My other kids, Maddie and Gabe, heard about us talking about it and said, we want to do it too. And that's how they ended up on the trial. Even though I myself volunteered, I didn't get to be in it. I did not ask them. And I know I did consent and I regret it every single day. People beating me up is not going to help the bigger problem. Like it's not, like you're just making it so more people, because there are a lot more kids that were injured and a lot of parents that I've talked to whose parents won't speak up because of exactly what's happening to the people that are speaking up. So I just want to make that clear. Like, what side are you on? Am I the enemy, or is Pfizer, Moderna, the government, and et cetera, the enemy? Like, who do you just attack the right enemy? I screwed up. I'm admitting it. I deal with it every day. I cry every day. Like my life, like my daughter's life is miserable. It's affected our whole family. Like, just stop it. Just stop it. You're not helping anybody. And if you think you're a good Christian for doing it, you're not. You're not a Christian.
It's not just that. It's like,
it's not nice. It's not helping.
No, and it's like it was an environment where nobody could fathom the risks, and it was the patriotic thing to do, and
right.
and what
and I thought I knew enough that it was safe. I knew somebody in it. She felt it was good enough that she put her son in it.
No, and what's not that it's unfair and it's unproductive, but it's mostly unfair because everybody who purports to have known more at the time, you know, we use our knowledge now and then retroactively apply it. There's no one had a concept. Now, sure, and also people undermine or downplay or forget the absolute terror that everybody was in. And
yeah,
it's not just a valid point. The internet is a bad place just because you'll get it from people who are not genuinely believing it but know that it upsets you, and they use it as a tactic to try to silence you.
Yeah, that's true.
And people have to also appreciate, although some
it won't
people
work.
do. Well, no, but it might work on others, and in which case
Yeah.
we're actually having an underrepresentation of people speaking out about what their true
you
stories
are.
It's not just that there's no judgment. It's people need to understand and empathize with the actual meaning of hot empathy, which is, but for the grace of God, this could have been any one of us, and so you have to deal with that. And I don't know how people deal with it. It's the internet is unforgiving and merciless, but then there's the other side of it, which is the good side, and then there's humanity, which actually exists beyond the internet ways. But we're going to get into this. So we're going to get into the actual trial process. You have a friend, educated friend, who probably also got through it unscathed.
Mhm.
And you say, okay, well, the kids want to do it. The kids are excited. Everybody feels
Mhm.
like they're being patriotic. They're going to help
A
humanity.
whole group of friends. It
And,
wasn't,
and,
I mean,
and what's the
yeah.
worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen is
Yeah, well, that's the point. Like for me, in my mind, if anything were to happen, like at that point, it's like I would want it to happen then, because then you'd have all the doctors there. They would do everything they could to figure it out. Like they would get better care than if it happened, if you had a reaction outside of it. But that is not what happened at all.
So now, what was this process like? Like, people on the channel, we've talked about the Brooke Jackson whistleblower lawsuits, her experience with these Pfizer trials. Brooke has not
Very
yet come on.
accurate.
Well,
Very accurate.
She hasn't come on directly yet, but Robert Barnes, my
Right. I've talked. I know Brooke. So it's everything that she said is accurate. Like she was the confirmation of what, like, I had my viewpoint as like my kids being participants in it. And she had the viewpoint from the other side. And she is 100% accurate. Like so many things were unorganized and it wasn't, yeah.
Okay, so you know what we're going to do now? Everyone who's watching on YouTube, we're going to end it here, and I'm going to go to Rumble, and then I'm going to put the entire interview on YouTube tomorrow. So move on over to the Rumble platform. Links are there. So I'm going to end this in 3, 2, 1. Remove YouTube, and now we're exclusive on Rumble.
Okay.
So nothing changes on our end, and I'm going to put the entire interview out there because the purpose of this is to get people to know what the heck happened to your daughter. And they can be callous, unforgiving, and blame whomever they want, but they should know that we
need to know, because people don't know, because it's been censored. Just like everything else has been censored in our world forever.
Okay, so let's start from day one. You find out you're admitted to the. Well, actually, no. Started before then. How do you submit for the to become members, and how do you find out that you've been approved to partake in this?
So there was a link that you went on to, and with some very basic questions like the age, and really a lot of it was like any pre-existing conditions, which, the only thing that Maddie had was she was diagnosed with dermatographia at one point, which is like where if you scratch yourself, you can get a hive, and ADHD. That is it. That's the only, and she had she had tubes in her ears when she was younger, and she had her adenoids removed. And that was all disclosed to them.
What are adenoids?
They're in your nose. It's like a lot of people that have like, I don't know, a lot of times they'll remove them whenever they remove your tonsils.
Okay.
But if you have a lot of ear infections or like a lot of like sinus infections or whatever, yes, that's
maybe I needed to have my adenoids.
I don't even know if that's the right thing to do, to be honest with you. Well, now that I've learned what I've learned, so don't get them removed.
I avoid any and all unnecessary procedures to the extent possible. But I whenever I would get the slightest congestion, I would go straight to a sinus infection or an ear infection, and like up to adulthood. So hold on one second. I just had one more question there. You submit. They ask for the history.
Yep. So they asked for like any pre-existing conditions, the age, any medications are on. The only medication that Maddie was on was Vyvanse, and she only took it while she was at school, so Monday through Friday, for ADHD.
Okay, Vyvanse is for ADHD.
Right. So she didn't take it in the summer. She didn't take it on the weekends, just Monday through Friday while she was at school, so she could pay attention.
Okay. No. Do they do blood tests? They don't do any sort of blood tests.
So they do blood tests at the initial visit, but they don't wait for any results from it before they give you your first dose.
That's
so they didn't even wait to find out if they had COVID before their first dose. So it turns out, and this is why I know, I had COVID when they had their first dose and did not realize it. I had 0 symptoms that were known at the time. So this was in December. Mine were all gastro and heart. No breathing issues, no stuffy nose, no fever, none of that stuff. The only reason I got a test done is I all of a sudden, out of the blue, and it was after they got their first dose, lost my taste and smell. And I was like, and that they had just started saying was a symptom. And I was like, I need to, it was I need to go get tested. So I went and got tested. I was positive. So then we still didn't have the results from the trial on the kids. So we had them, my husband's work did PCR testing. So we took the kids in, even though they had been tested at the trial. And my oldest son, Gabe, tested positive. Lucas was negative, and Maddie was negative, and so was my husband, Pat. And my oldest son actually did get one dose of the COVID jab, and he never got the second dose. We called them, and yeah.
He never got the second dose because he was COVID positive when they gave him the first one.
Right.
Let me just stop you though at the first. Everything makes sense backwards, but has to be lived forwards. They take blood tests.
Yep.
For what purpose if they don't wait for the results before administering the first dose?
I don't know. And I can send you a document of all the data that they collect, which we have asked for, and we're trying to get the information. We have been denied it. I can send it to you. It's like 14 pages long. Brooke Jackson can talk to it even more. But it shows all of the things that they're supposed to do. I'll send it to you so you can share it with the world.
Well, I'm totally neurotic. Like I don't want to share anything and accidentally share something that I'm not supposed to share. So
it's publicly available.
Okay. Now, and one thing I understood from another interview that there were certain potential genetic predispositions for certain adverse reactions that could be genetically determined if proper blood tests were done. Is that accurate or?
So based on what I'm learning, I think that is the case, but these are like genetic things that normally don't cause any problems that anybody would even know about, to be honest with you. That's my perception. One is the MTHFR. Can I swear?
Oh yeah. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So it's everybody jokingly calls it the motherfucker gene. Yeah. Yes. And it is. So Maddie does have that mutation. And the way I found out is because my cousin also had a severe reaction to the Moderna vaccine, and she has that mutation.
I just love the idea that they take blood so they can do tests, and it's the illusion of safety. It's the illusion of professionalism. When
and then they won't even give you the results from like what they took. They won't even share that with us. They won't even give it.
So you get approved. They say, come for your first day. We're going to do what? We're going to do. We'll ask for some history, ask for some whatever. I wonder how many people got rejected from the study or from the test because of issues that might have been.
You went and got through the first round because you have to remember, like in the United States, everything is done through Epic, My Chart. So you can get information on anybody, anywhere. So they have access to everything, all their immunizations, that's how it is.
Okay.
I did not realize this. And like you say, hey, sure, share her information everywhere. Like you don't think about what that means.
Okay. So they get approved. You give the history, they show up, they take a blood test on the first day that they're administering the first dose. What is that like? You sent me a picture and
they were excited. They looked bored because it took forever if you look at the picture, but they were not nervous. Once again, we did not ask them to participate in this. They asked to be in it. I would never force my kids to even get a vaccine. I guess you could say I forced it when they were younger because I thought that was the right thing to do, but we never had any issues. They went there. They weren't afraid. My daughter actually is, ever since she was little, she's wanted to become a nurse before all this happened. So stuff like this fascinates her. Like she likes to watch blood being drawn. I don't, but she does. Maddie loves that stuff. So for her, this was exciting.
And so you show up, they take blood.
So my husband took them to the first appointment. And I was not there because they didn't want more than the amount of people that needed to be there because remember, this is during COVID. And you want minimal, you want the least amount of people there as possible. So they came back from it. It was no big deal. They got back.
This is at the hospital. This is at the Cincinnati.
That's one of their locations. It's right down the street from their main campus.
Okay.
in a dilapidated building. But yeah,
They show up, they take
Yep.
blood, they get the first
their
shot.
first dose. Yep.
They wait there for how long to see if they have any anaphylactic reaction?
I think it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes. It's
And then
been
they're
so
sent
long.
home.
And then they go home. And they had no issues. None of them did. Like they got home. It was like kind of like when you get the flu shot.
Mhm.
Like Maddie did so her arm has always, and so is mine, gotten swollen whenever we get flu shots or any vaccine, but it always goes down. So that did happen with this. They give you a thing. They give you this whole like bag of like whatever there's a thermometer in there. There's a thing to measure how much your arm gets swollen. There's COVID tests in there in case you do get COVID because they come and pick it up. So she had the typical reaction to the first dose.
But what is like? This is not administering a jab that's been around for. This is part of the clinical trial. So you get in there, they stick you and send you home in 20 minutes and say, let us know if something radical happens.
Yes. So they have an app that you recorded. I think it was for a week. It was Trial Max is what it's called. And you record, but what you record in the Trial Max app is just like, what's your temperature? How swollen is your arm? Do you have a headache? Like the things that they had in the
Generic
the things that they're telling everybody
Yeah.
that can happen. That's all that's in there. There's no free form. So if anything outside of that happens, you call, and I can send this to you separately. There's like a little card they gave you. You call this number that goes to the trial, like to the trial group or whatever, to report it. So there's nothing that you have where you're formally like documenting it. You have to call.
You have to call. Okay. This
So
is
there's no free form. So if you have anything outside of what they're telling you these normal reactions are, you can't do it in the app that they give you. There's nothing to do to record that.
It's like, I mean, it's amazing. It's designed to yield a result and not designed to reflect a result. So, okay, so you get your generic whatever, yada yada. Hypothetically, if you need to call someone, you need to talk to someone. Who are you instructed to call?
There's a number that you call, and it goes to basically a nurse line or something for whoever is running the trial. So we ended up calling that number after her second dose.
Okay. So before we even get there, so they get the first shot. Nobody has any meaningful.
Well, Gabe, my oldest, did, but he also had COVID at the same time that he got his first dose. He was sick for a very long time.
When do you find out that he had COVID at the time they gave him the? This is like some people could think to try to blame you, and that's how can they do this? Administer the COVID in a test without first determining if the kid has COVID in the first place.
Once again, like the thing that people don't remember, because you only remember what's happening now, is back then it was all upper respiratory. I had 0 upper respiratory symptoms, none, no fever, no nose. It was all in my stomach. I had like severe stomach pains and I had chest pains like first, but then they went away, and then it was like all gastro. So for me, I had a stomach virus. Like I didn't even think until, so it was I think it was the day after they got their first dose, I lost my taste and smell, and we took them in.
It's not up to you to know if you have COVID when they're trying to administer this in a clinical trial. So they
didn't wait though.
They give the jab, and then when do they say, "Hey, by the way, your kid had COVID when we tested him"?
So you want to know what's funny? They called us and told us that my other son Lucas had COVID and not Gabe.
Okay, so that was.
I'm not joking. Yeah, because he never, I mean, I guess maybe he was tested again. He was tested multiple times and never had COVID other than that one. I think they mixed up their tests. All 3 kids were together whenever they drew their blood, did the nasal swab, and gave them their first dose. They were all in the same room. I think they mixed them up.
Okay.
So then we sent in another test because they send you home with one. So we did that for Gabe, because even though he had the PCR test at my husband's work, they asked us to do there. So we did it, and he was confirmed at that point.
Okay. How long after he had received the first experimental clinical trial jab?
It was the day after the PCR test that my husband's work did. We got the results within the same day. So it was
You
the
got-
day after.
The day. Okay. So, okay.
And they still had not called us about either kid when we called them.
When do you so you find out the next day, or do you find out later?
We found out from my husband's work, not from the vaccine trial. We called them and said he had it.
Okay.
And then we get results like after the fact, when we had asked for like medical documents. All they sent us were the COVID results. And that's when we found out that they were saying Lucas had COVID and not Gabe. We didn't even know at that point.
And when did you find out that it was actually Gabe and not Lucas that had COVID?
Well, we knew it the next day because we had the PCR test done at my husband's work.
Okay,
but
so
we didn't find out from them until they're very disorganized.
Okay,
Very disorganized.
Some might call that beyond disorganized, but
I have emails to show all of this. Like we're like, yeah.
And
I'm sorry, I have a headache. I keep rubbing my head.
Don't worry about it. In fact, now that you mentioned it, my forehead seems to be glowing under the heat of my floodlights. So you find this out. What's their response in the context of the clinical trials? They say, "Whoops! Well, now we have to scratch your kid off the test because he's been tainted."
So they still followed him. They had us send in the COVID test. Like a courier picks up the COVID test from us, and it was confirmed. And then they had like a virtual visit. And the funny thing is, they get paid extra money if they get COVID, like for the virtual visit. Yeah.
The clinicians or whoever's doing the test gets paid more money.
No, Pfizer pays the kids more money.
Oh, okay, fine.
We had no clue. Yeah. Yes. We're like, oh, okay, like it's a virtual visit. Like it made 0 sense.
Okay, they do a virtual visit. And now I'm wondering if they actually keep the kid in the study so they can actually just use it for positive statistics, not for negative statistics.
I don't know, because they still followed him, but I don't know if that was because all 3 kids were in and they just humored us, or if they actually followed him. But they did not give him the second dose. They did offer it to him after the when they unblinded everybody. And we obviously, but at that point, Maddie had her reaction. We're like, no, thank you. We're good.
Okay. So what's the time frame? What happens after the first dose? You find out your kid has COVID. What's the time frame until the second jab?
So December 30th is when they got their first dose, and January 20th, which was my son, the oldest, his 16th birthday. This is why it's like ingrained in my head. That's when they got their second dose. So just Maddie and Lucas got the second dose. Gabe did go to the appointment with them.
When did Gabe find out he was not going to get the second dose?
So he turned 16 in the middle of this. Right after he was confirmed positive for COVID, okay. They said they weren't going to give it to him. I think he had to wait a certain amount of time, and that certain amount of time ended up being when they unblinded, because he turned 16 in the middle of the trial. So they approved, what was it? The 16 to 18-year-olds, they approved that before the 12 to 15-year-olds. So he jumped into the group that they had approved already.
Now,
and then he was unblinded early and offered it.
Okay. And now looking back at this, I presume this looks like a schlock fest of a trial. At the time, you're not. I mean, at the time, it's like it might be humorous, but you don't have any big red flags going off.
Oh, I have red flags going off. Yes, but I'm scared too. At that point, I still had confidence that. So when Maddie had a reaction, they had told us to take her to Cincinnati Children's, because that's where the trial is being held. They'd have access to the principal investigator, and the trial would have access to all of her records. She'd get the best care there. And I don't know, like, it depends on where you live, but here, like, none of the adult hospitals will treat children. They immediately send you to Cincinnati Children's. And if you don't want to go there, then you have to go to one of the neighboring children's hospitals. So there's Dayton Children's and Nationwide Children's, which are both about an hour to 2 hours away.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the second jab and the adverse reactions, which are the beginning of the nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
What second shot, second day comes around? What's the procedure there?
For the second dose,
Yeah.
they go in, they draw more blood, and they give them the second dose.
Do they, I'm going to ask the obvious question in retrospect now. Do they test to see if they have COVID and actually wait for the results the second time?
They don't wait. They get another COVID test. Yeah. I believe so. I can't remember for sure. I'm going to be honest. I can't remember. It's been quite a while. I really feel like they did, because they want to test all along the way if they have COVID or not, because that was their whole thing, saying that if you got the actual vaccine, that, you know, that was their measurement. That's all they cared about. Did you get COVID or not?
Well, no, but now I'm curious to know if they did the same thing the second time, as in do the test, administer the second dose, and then find out if you had COVID. You know, once you've already.
Can I get back to you, because I don't like, I'm very fact based, and I'm pretty sure they did, but I don't want to say that they did.
Don't
if
worry.
They didn't, I have to look back in my notes.
It'll be the most insignificant of details now in any event. So two of your three go back, Maddie, and I forget the name of your other one who gets the second shot.
Lucas. Yeah.
Luke. What happens now? So they get the second shot and they go home.
Yep. They go home. One thing that Maddie did say is that she said that hurt more than the first time, which was weird. And honestly, Lucas said the same thing. And he ended up getting the placebo, but they both said that hurt more than the first time. I don't know why. Anyways, we go home. It was my son's 16th birthday. We had his, nobody could come over. It's COVID. And so we had his birthday dinner with just our family. I have pictures. We had a cake for him. We have a picture of all three kids joking with putting their finger to their arm, and went to bed. And then in the middle of the night, Maddie came into our room. She's 12 years old at the time. And she said, "I don't feel right. Something's wrong. Can I sleep with you?" And I mean, it's the middle of the night, and we're like, I'm like, okay, whatever. She climbed in between the two of us, which is weird, even more weird. When we woke up, we said, hey, because we knew that after the second dose that they could potentially not feel great. We said, you can stay home. You don't need to go to school. The first time that they got their first dose, we were quarantined because of me having COVID. So they got to sleep through that. So that wasn't an issue. Maddie has always been somebody that loves school. She doesn't like getting behind. She doesn't have having to make up work. So she's like, I'm going to go. If I don't feel well, I'll call you, which I realized after the fact was a big fat lie. She made it through the day. I don't even know how she made it through the day. There was only one of the times that she spoke, and it was with Del Bigtree, and her account of what happened was the first time that I really heard it. And I don't even know how he got her to tell it, but I was crying. I don't know how she made it through the day. She walked in the door, getting off the bus, and she dropped her bag and just lost it. My husband called me. I was working at school. And he said, Maddie's having some sort of reaction to the vaccine. I called the line, and I hear her in the background going, Mom, my heart feels like it's being ripped through my neck. And at that point, I said, I gotta go. And they covered for me. I left. And by the time I got home, the trial line had called back, and they said, you need to go to the ER. We prefer that you go to Cincinnati Children's, which was further away. And at this point, I didn't even realize the different, my kids have never needed to go to the ER. I didn't realize even now I do. If we would have taken to a local hospital here, they would have just transferred them to Cincinnati Children's. So they're like, it's better if you just come here. So that my husband took her. My husband has a medical background. She was scared. She wanted him with her because he knew more than I did. And so what they were worried about was that, so she had severe abdominal pain near her appendix. Her arms were numb, like her fingers were white, ice cold. Her toes were white and ice cold. She had a severe headache, chest pain.
This is the day. This is like when she's rushed to the ER the day after.
Less than 24 hours. Yes.
And
it all started in the middle of the night. So like, she's somebody that like, you know how some people can get sick and they'll just push through it? That's Maddie. That's how I am. I probably made her that way. Some people don't. Yeah.
Part of what blows my mind here as well is you're in a clinical trial, and you're by all accounts having an issue, and the people conducting the clinical trial say go to the hospital,
go to the ER. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sent you the ER thing.
Yeah. No. I just so everybody knows, like, you sent me a lot of stuff because I want to make sure that as much as I can vet. No, it's just.
They weren't there.
They weren't there. It's no like, we're coming to get you. We need to know what's going on.
Nope.
Go to the ER and
nope.
Okay, so you go to the ER. Mm-hmm. I've seen what I don't know how much you've already made public and published.
I've made a lot public. So I don't care. I have nothing to hide.
You go to the ER, and they what sort of tests do they do then? And you obviously inform them that you're part of a clinical trial with Pfizer.
Yep. They know.
Did they know before you mentioned it, or were you notifying them for the first time?
We thought that they called ahead of time, and they had no clue when my husband got there with Maddie. So we told them. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So this is one hell of follow up from Pfizer to take care of their clinical trial participants. They send you to the ER. ER knows nothing of nothing, and you show up and you say, we're in this clinical trial. This is what she just got jabbed yesterday. This is what's going on. Knowing this only after the fact, and it's like one of the few things that I've learned, but did they do like a blood test for troponin to see if she had no stroke?
They did a renal profile, which is like and there were abnormal results in that. They did a urinalysis, which showed that she had a moderate amount of blood in her urine, which is obviously abnormal. She did not have her period. She still hadn't had started. She was 12.
I'll just say, just to interrupt you there, because I knew that fact as well. Like, even if she had for the fact that she had not had her period, and then did they try to pass that off as maybe she had her period? And
they didn't even tell us. We didn't find out until we had so at this point, like, I didn't realize how valuable my chart is, where like gives you all the test results. So we didn't even know until we went to the follow-up appointment with her GP, her general practitioner, like our family doctor, that there was blood in her urine. They never even said anything. They also did an ultrasound because they thought that she had appendicitis. Her appendix couldn't be visualized, but they said there was no sign of, and I printed off out. Yeah.
Did they tell you why it couldn't be visualized? That in and of itself
it just says there is a diffuse gaseous filled bowel seen throughout the right lower quadrant, no evidence of inflammatory change, limited visualized right kidney and urinary bladder appears normal, appendix not visualized. However, there is no ultrasound findings to support a diagnosis of appendicitis.
Okay, and do they?
And they did a COVID test. She was negative. Her potassium was low and her glucose was high. I'm not sure why. She's never had high glucose before. They gave her sodium chloride, so an IV, Zofran and Tylenol, and sent her home and said to go see our family doctor.
So they send her home overnight, or just
the same day? She never was admitted. She was there for a while, but yep.
Wow. Okay. She gets home, and then what happens next? Like, what's the progression of the symptoms, the progression of what she ultimately became afflicted with?
So part of her other problem that I didn't mention is she had these electrical zaps going up and down her spine. You couldn't even touch her back. She couldn't lay on her back.
This is the first time.
The first day. Yeah. She walked hunched over. Yeah. So all of that continued on the 23rd. She had severe nauseousness and diarrhea, extreme fatigue. There was, I don't want to, there were things that were not normal happening to her. I don't want to humiliate her. So she went back to the ER on the 23rd. And she still had her urinalysis had a moderate amount of blood in her urine.
Were you advised of that when it happened?
No,
Or only later?
later. They did another ultrasound and x-ray. It was normal. And her CRP, the C-reactive protein, was 2.9. Her creatinine was low, white blood cells were low, red blood cells were high, monocyte was high. So they did like a little bit more blood work. A bunch of things were abnormal. Negative COVID test. They gave her an IV, lactated ringers, and Toradol, and sent her home.
Okay.
On the 25th is when we found out about the blood in her urine when we went to her our family doctor.
That's how many days now? Again, after the first ER visit?
4
4 days.
Mhm.
And what is happening to her in these 4 days? She goes home. She's not going to school, I presume.
Nope. Couldn't make it to school. Nope.
So they
Couldn't
literally
even function.
they literally what they gave her some painkillers, some Advil, say go
They
home. And sleep
did,
it
and
off?
she just kept getting worse. And we got desperate on the 28th. We have a neighbor who has her own internal medicine practice. She doesn't right now, but she did at the time, and she gave her a steroid shot. We were desperate. We're like, can you help her? We don't know what to do. Because they wouldn't give her anything. And I honestly think that saved her life.
But before we even get there, what is Pfizer doing in this?
Nothing. They haven't called us. Nobody's called us. Nobody.
Have
My
you-
husband was emailing back and forth with, and we have a whole email chain with the trial people.
So you're emailing them.
Mhm.
You've called the hotline. They know that you
Mhm.
went to the ER at
Mhm.
least once. Did you call them to tell them you went back 3 days later?
Yes. Plus, there's notes in her charts that they were talking to Dr. Robert Frank, the principal investigator. There's notes throughout her chart where he was saying what tests to do and not to do. And I mean, he was calling the shots. At one point, and I think I sent it to you, he says, there have been no reactions like this in the clinical trial so far. It's a clinical trial.
How many kids were in the clinical? There was 2,000 kids?
Yes. And 1,000 of them got the actual, roughly, I'm rounding, got the actual dose.
I mean, this is enraging to anybody who's watching from the outside, but you enrolled for a clinical trial. Your daughter now, the day after the second shot, has had some reaction. They say go to the hospital, and after that, radio silence, but for some emails back and forth. You call them and let you know she's back in the ER 3 days later. And by the time she had to get a steroid shot from your friend, still
a neighbor, he was a doctor. Like this, it was legit.
Yeah, no. This I don't. No, nobody's going to be doing that off. You can't use stuff off label. Nothing from Pfizer. Nothing.
No.
What happens on the 28th? She gets a steroid shot, and then what happens?
It helped her for a short. Like it immediately helped her, but then it started all back up again. And on the 30th, we went back to the ER again.
On the 30th, so 10 days later. And when you say it started back up, it
all started right back up. Like she got very, like, I think it was through the night, she got some relief. And then it was enough to like calm down whatever was going on in her body. Her body was attacking itself essentially.
And so the same symptoms,
came right back up in
lightning,
more. Yes.
abdominal pains.
Right. So then she had a rash on her arm where she got her IV. When we got to the ER doctor was saying that he thought it might be fibromyalgia. Yeah. Her red blood cells were high. Her platelets were high. Lymphocytes were low. I mean, a bunch of not normal blood work.
And still,
she was admitted at that point
to the hospital on the 30th. 10 days
on the
later.
30th. Yes.
And when does Pfizer get to you? When does Pfizer get to you?
Pfizer has never talked to us. Let's just just go there. Never.
Okay, well, let me try to steel man the devil here. Pfizer's going to say, okay, we don't, what's hands off? It's whoever's conducting this clinical trial. Who is conducting the clinical trial?
Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where we were going to the ER and where she was admitted 3 times with Dr. Robert Prank, was the principal investigator through their Gamble program, which is one of, I think, 10 sites apparently now, that, and I can send you information on this, that are like the premier sites for doing vaccine trials.
Okay.
Sorry, I have to, did I lose you?
No, I'm still here. I did. Where'd you?
My son, I'm sorry.
Don't worry. I can still.
He has to be picked up. This is. I just need to tell him.
Don't worry. While you do that, I can read a couple of some Rumble rants.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Don't worry about it at all. I need to know when. So Pfizer never gets back to you. You're dealing with the hospital that's conducting the clinical trial, and you're trying to get in touch with Pfizer to say, Houston, we have a problem,
right?
And maybe it's just something totally random. Things happen at the exact.
Well, the thing is, we're supposed to go through the principal investigator. You're not supposed to directly contact Pfizer.
And your principal investigator was whom again?
Dr. Robert Frank. Google him. See all the wonderful videos that come up. One of which he says there have been no adverse events in the children's trial while she was in the hospital.
Wow. Okay. So she's admitted to the hospital now on the 30th.
Mm-hmm.
How long? What's done with her in the hospital? What are they telling you is the problem?
So remember, the ER doctor suspected fibromyalgia, which is, fibromyalgia is pain you can't explain. Anyways, they put her on gabapentin, and then within 45 minutes, she had a reaction to the gabapentin. She had ringing in her ears. She couldn't stand any light. This is a girl that likes all the lights on. She wanted all the lights off. She couldn't see. Her eyes were blurry, headache. She had pain in her neck. Again, it felt like it was pulling on her neck. Her arms, and I'm reading from my notes. Shoulders felt like, because it's been so long ago.
And this is not a courtroom where I'm going to say, hey, let me see your notes, Stephanie.
Well, you know what? Like, that's how it's been, though. She had an erratic pulse.
But they gave her
she doesn't gabapentin, which is
I don't
Pfizer.
know.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
I know what gabapentin is, sort of, but I know that it's not a nothing drug. What are they?
It's very, very. It's a serious drug that you can get addicted to. It's very heavy. Like, it's not something that you should be giving kids.
Well, they're giving her gabapentin because of her pain. Because of what appears to be an adverse reaction to the clinical trial in which she was a part now.
Mm-hmm. Giving her, and then they sent a bunch of psychiatrists. Everything was focused on her having mental problems, which she never had before. Anxiety, like, that's what they were focused on. They sent the pain management team, which is like, pain management is all about being able to have skills to manage pain and drugs. Not a neurologist. They didn't send a neurologist. They sent psychiatrists and the pain management team. That was it.
Let me ask.
3 days she was in the hospital.
This is going to be asking for conjecture on your part, but is part of you at this point thinking that this is part of a scheme, a conspiracy to say, downplay this, make it something psychological so that we can write it off as not being an adverse reaction to do you think that people are working together here? And I know it's a very
So at that point, I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. The only place that we could take her was here. So it's like, what people don't realize when you're in that situation is, if you don't try what they're saying or believe them and prove that out wrong, then they will blame you. From that very beginning, it's like, if you don't, they put it back on you. If you don't believe that this is what's happening, your kid's going to get worse. So they do a whole psychological number on you. They do. And I'm not the only one this happened to. There's been a lot of kids injured, and that's the first thing I tell the parents. I'm like, this is not psychological, because I learned, I'm like, you need to know they are going to mess with your head. It is not psychological. There is something happening in your kid's body, and you need to not listen to them.
I mean, the idea that it would be psychological and just happen to occur within 24 hours of the second jab.
Where she had no issues before.
No, and it's.
But they make you feel like if you don't believe them and try this, that it's your fault. I have recordings of it. Them saying that.
Oh, yeah. You sent me one that I didn't get all the way through because it came and you sent me a little, not enough time before this stream for me to listen to the whole thing. So she's in the hospital now for 3 days, and they're trying to pass this off as purely psychological. What is the bottom line of what they say?
When they say nothing. I mean, it's that they can't figure. You know, there's nothing showing in the minimal amount of blood tests and other tests that they've done. At this point, they've not done a lumbar puncture, they've not done an MRI, they've not done a skin punch biopsy, they've not done an EMG, all the things that would have showed what was going on. Plus, they haven't addressed that there's blood in her urine.
Okay, and then what?
And there still was blood in her urine.
And they discharged her after 3 days.
They discharged her. Yep.
What improved in her condition that they discharged her, that they subsequently said, okay, we made the problem better? Like, what happens that they discharge her?
They drugged her with gabapentin, which made her have that one episode. And one thing that I will say that would help her is whenever they gave her the IV, just fluids. And this is consistent with everybody. Like, I don't know what it does, but I guess it like clears out your I don't know what it does. I know people that have, like, there's somebody in England where she has her blood drawn out and it like makes her better.
So
I don't know, but like the IV drugs would, like just IV fluids would make her feel minimally better.
Okay. 3 days.
Plus there's nothing showing up in their tests. Yeah.
Okay. And then they say sufficiently better, go home and deal with it, sleep it off.
Yeah, basically they're saying that it'll go away.
Okay, and then what happens? So she gets out now. It's going to be on January. It'll be on February 2nd, February 3rd. She's out of the hospital.
Right. So they start with her, but at this point she's barely able to walk. So they start her in physical therapy on February 4th.
There are going to be people who are going to listen to this and say it's almost too far-fetched to conceive that you have a daughter within 10 days goes from being healthy to not being able to walk. And they're saying it's fibromyalgia. I mean, I think I know some of the stigma around fibromyalgia, but they're saying it's psychological, the reason for which she says
they're setting this whole thing up for functional neurologic disorder, which you will hear almost everybody that has a reaction, other than if they're dead, killed, and it's their heart. Everybody else with any neurologic conditions happening, they are saying it's functional neurologic disorder and that it's due to anxiety. They're setting this up from the very beginning for it to be that. And they put that diagnosis in her chart the day before the EUA, the day before. EUA was submitted April 9th. The diagnosis of functional neurologic disorder was put into her charts on, April 9th. Is when they submitted it. April 8th is when they put it into her chart, that diagnosis. So they're setting it up all along the way for this. Like if I took
functional neurological disorder, I briefly looked it up, and I'm just asking our locals chat to see who knows more. It's a catch-all for anything with no concrete diagnosis.
No concrete diagnosis, because they don't do the test that will show something concrete, which we ended up getting later on, which is an EMG, a skin punch biopsy, and a tilt table test. And then there's other tests that were done along the way that were not normal, that help with her eventual diagnosis, but they ignored.
So they send her home, say F and D.
Well, that wasn't until April 8th that they actually put it in there. They started talking about it during her first hospital visit.
What happened? Sorry, go ahead.
So I don't know if I sent you the letter that was sent from Dr. Whalen from UCLA, the Children's Hospital, about his concerns with the COVID vaccine in children causing an MIS-C type reaction in kids. I think I sent that to you.
I'm not sure that you did, but I think I looked through everything you sent me, and I don't think I remember seeing that. What is that?
So he had sent a letter to the FDA about his concerns. He's a very well-renowned doctor. I'll send it to you. It's still available online. Anybody can access it. We asked about this in I think it was her second ER visit, because as soon as this started happening with Maddie, I started Googling, trying to figure out, like, because I'm scared. It's my daughter. And that, MIS-C started coming up. And then my husband's boss is actually a doctor. He's the one that sent that to my husband. We showed the doctors and they laughed at us and said, this can only happen with COVID, not the COVID vaccine. And I know about it can happen to kids from COVID. My neighbor's son had it happen to him, like in between. It was in, I think, March, maybe February or March, that it happened to her son. And he, at Cincinnati Children's, he was treated with IVIG, which is what Maddie's being treated with now, and steroids. And he's fine now. It's your body attacks itself. It can attack the nerves. It can attack your organs.
Well, we're going to get to the ultimate diagnosis in a second. What happens between February 3rd and April? I mean, like, what are those?
There's more ER visits. There's an ER visit on February 9th.
And why? Just because she's in too much pain?
She continues to get worse. So that one, I forget which one. So that one, she had pressure on the right side of her head, dizzy when standing and walking on stairs, feels like there's a weight on her back, then randomly it'll feel like the weight is being lifted up and dropped. Like, she described this stuff in detail, and it's exactly like these adults later that, like, she had nobody to copy. Like, it's the exact same description that other people are giving now. At one point, and I can't remember. Yeah, at that point, she couldn't even give herself a shower. I was giving her showers. She still had a rash all over her body. We stopped the gabapentin at that time. I'm trying to think. At one point, she ended up passing out at home, and we took her in. I'm trying to see which one it was at. She just kept getting worse. The thing is, like, they just kept sending her home, and it's like, what are we going to do other than go to the ER every time?
Are there any realistic options, alternatives? Like, you go back to the best medical clinic or whatever the best hospital. Are there alternatives that you can contemplate?
The other alternatives locally here were adult hospitals, and they just send you to Cincinnati Children's. So there were no other options. Cincinnati Children's is like, that's a hospital that people come from all over the world.
Yeah. It's like
you have to understand, they're like, yes, they're one of the best
for kids.
Like, even other local, like Dayton Children's is local, but they only have like certain capabilities, and that's where we're at now. But they send people to Cincinnati Children's. Like, that's where everybody sends everybody. So no, there wasn't.
And another question, who's paying for your medical bills while all this is going on?
Our insurance, and we were being given, like, the copay. We were being sent bills.
May I ask the obvious question? Pfizer, nor the clinical trials assumed all of your costs?
Nope. So in the end, we had to get a lawyer involved, and all they ended up doing was paying the copay part. It still went through our insurance for the rest of it. She does now have, and this was because of Cincinnati Children's, so they dumped it on the government. She has Medicaid now, long-term care, because she's that sick. She's approved for it.
I'm trying to figure out which fork I want to go first on this. She's getting worse. And when do you find out that they put in the diagnosis for FND, a functional neurological disorder, before the emergency authorization use is granted?
I I found it after the fact when I mean, they have been talking about it all along. In between there, and I'm sorry, there's like so much that has happened, and I probably should just send you the document.
No, go for it. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of other ER visits happened in between. And then they wanted to put her on antidepressants, and our family doctor refused to do it because of her age and the risk of suicide, and because she's like, she doesn't have anxiety. She's like, I won't do it. So they made us see a psychiatrist virtual visit through Cincinnati Children's. Find out later that this guy, Dr. Brian Barentz, I can send you his name. He actually worked in clinical trials and had only been at Cincinnati Children's for a short amount of time. We had 2 virtual visits with him, and he's the one that diagnosed her with anxiety, put her on Lexapro, and tried to keep upping the dose of Lexapro, and then diagnosed her with the functional neurologic disorder on April 8th. In between there, she did have another hospital stay. So between when she had her second dose and April 9th, which is when she had her last ER visit, and they admitted her for a month and a half in inpatient rehabilitation. She had 10 ER visits, and that was her 3rd hospital stay. So she had another one in March where they did that was the first time they did an MRI, and they did the MRI of her spine a day before the data cutoff for the trial.
what did that test yield by way of result?
That spine MRI had some minor abnormalities that explained it away, but that's not unusual. Like, nothing showing up for people in spine MRIs. It's not. It's lumbar punctures, EMGs, skin punch biopsy, and blood tests are what show things of what's happening. She didn't damage her spine. She didn't fall. She didn't, she had nothing pre-existing.
You mentioned a month and a half in basically rehabilitation in the hospital. That started in April?
Yes.
When
she got to the hospital, so through all this, she was unable to eat. By the time she was admitted the last time, her blood sugar was at like 44, I think. By the time we were desperate at that point, we're like, you have to admit her. There's something wrong. Like, she could do nothing. They wouldn't give us a wheelchair for her. She scooted around our house on her butt. I eventually got to the point where I'm like, I'm done with this. I went and got a used wheelchair. They wouldn't give her one because they said if we gave her a wheelchair, it would make her worse. All through that, she was doing physical therapy twice a week.
To recover from nothing.
Functional. She was doing cognitive behavioral therapy, through video because COVID. She was doing everything. We did everything they told us to do, and she did not get better. And then she was, so she got to the point where she could not eat or anything. So they gave her an NG tube when she was admitted in April. And she's had one ever since.
And that helps with eating.
That gives her nutrition because she can't swallow.
What was the context to being admitted for the month and a half?
They admitted her because she was not stable, and then they were able to get it approved through insurance into their inpatient intensive rehabilitation. So she would have PT twice a day, OT twice a day. There was recreational therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's like with a psychologist. She would have speech therapy, which is for the swallowing. That's what that falls under. So every day, and including the weekends. The only day she had off was Sundays. And she did that for a month and a half. They were able to get her to the point where she could walk with a walker, but her leg would drag, her legs would shake. They made zero progress on the swallowing. So their solution after that was to send her to a psych ward which was at Lindner Center of Hope, which is part of Cincinnati Children's. They lied to us. We did a tour. By the time, like, we did a tour ahead of time at night, they just lied about everything. Once she was being admitted, they brought her there by an ambulance, where they had to strap her down. The paramedics are like, she's not like the typical person that we bring here. And that was a red flag I had to follow. When she was in admission, there was somebody that, like, all kinds of stuff happening there, where somebody was like, had their face up against the window, somebody broke something. I'm like, this is not the right place for her. They also were not going to allow her to have her walker. They were going to make her use a wheelchair, which during the inpatient rehabilitation, that was one thing where they literally took away her wheelchair. The reason that she got discharged is because she could not get to the point of letting go of the walker. She would drop to the floor because she would it was the POTS, like her body was, her autonomic system was not working. She didn't even sweat for a long time.
But and nobody's gotten a proper diagnosis yet in all of this.
At that point, no. Nope.
This is.
So I want to mention one other thing. When they did her first MRI, which was in March, she got worse. So they did an MRI with contrast, gadolinium. And when she woke up from that, like, she could barely walk to begin with. When she woke up from that, she couldn't walk at all. She couldn't go to the bathroom. Like, it messed her up. I find out later. I don't think her body was able to detox the gadolinium. So the reason I say that is she ended up having another MRI in June. So that was after she was discharged, and she got worse. She lost all neck control. Once again, like, she got worse. And this is something that's happened to several other people with MRIs.
I'm reading in what we have, a locals community, and someone says she's describing the exact same thing I still suffer with.
Yeah.
Stiff neck, ringing, light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, headache, migraines, Moderna, disabled since May 2021.
Yes.
This is the events you're describing. It's horror and torture to begin with, and this is like, it almost. I mean, I'm telling you, it almost feels like malicious insult to the injury. That still nothing from Pfizer in all of this. Frank is your middle person, Dr. Frank,
and we have emails with him asking what was reported. They'd say everything was reported. We have an email where somebody had called about something else, recording, asking this poor person that, I mean, it's not her fault. She just was doing her job. But my husband was good about recording things. We have a lot of evidence.
When does she finally get a proper diagnosis?
So just fill in a few more things that happened in between there. So after her MRI in June, where she got worse, she always had trouble with her feeds. They were like gravity feeds, and they were giving her Cape Farms formula, and she was having a hard time with it. So at that point, we were at Dayton Children's, and we asked, hey, is there another formula we can try? And can we try doing a pump so it's not like pushed in her as fast? So they changed her to Elecare Junior at that time and started her on a pump. And she got significant, like, she was only on it for like a month, and she got way worse. It got to the point where her stomach like blew up. She started vomiting. Her tube came up in her throat. Once again, that FND diagnosis, we decided to take her to a local adult hospital, because at this point we don't trust Cincinnati Children's, and they can see her charts. So all they saw was FND in there, and they treated her horribly. We ended up having the lawyers write to them. They had to write an apology. It ended up that her tube was up in her throat because she couldn't breathe correctly, and they were trying to say it was anxiety. We wouldn't go to Cincinnati Children's, so we went to Dayton Children's. Once they took the tube out, she could breathe fine, but her stomach was blown up. They did bowel clean out, discharge her, and she wasn't in much better shape. She had you could see that she had like jaundice under her eyes, around her mouth. Well, it turns out that the allocator Jr. was part of the recall with Similac from the plant in Michigan. We find out in February. So she was in the hospital like over New Year's. We didn't know at the time. They're once again treating her like she's crazy, when in fact she had tainted formula. So after that, she was in very bad shape. We were desperate. There was somebody in Oregon, and he'd be fine if I used his name, Dr. Henry Ely. Maddie and I literally relocated, just the two of us, to Portland, Oregon, so that him and another doctor could treat her. And they were naturopathic doctors, and they were able to stabilize her to the point, I mean, she was very bad shape. Her whole body was swollen. It was not good. All because of that functional neurologic disorder diagnosis, that they ignored that there could be something else wrong on top of everything else. So we were there until July, but while we were there, we flew to New York to see a neurologist, that another injured person that I had been talking to, somebody who I had helped in the front end and she helped in the back end with us, that she went to, and he specializes in autoimmune, like neurologic reactions. He's a neurologist, and we went there. He did an EMG.
EMG stand
electromagnetic.
Someone in the channel knows faster than me.
Yeah.
Okay.
They hook up. It's like looking at how your muscles react, and your nerves react. And then they did a skin punch biopsy, which looks at, it's looking for small fiber neuropathy, which a lot of people have. Nobody had ever, Dayton Children's did do an EMG. They said it was normal. We have videos showing that it was not normal. I just now got a copy of the test. It was not normal. Let's just say, I can send you the videos to give you context. But this one showed that it was abnormal. And that with that and some additional tests that he did, plus he read all of the other tests that were abnormal in the history, she was diagnosed with chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. So basically, the myelin sheath of your nerves are damaged. So when that happens, it's kind of like an electrical cord. If you imagine having a cord and there's no like covering on it, you'll shock yourself. It doesn't work. So the signals don't work. It hurts. So the treatment for that is IVIG, which
what's IVIG?
Intravenous immunoglobulin therapy.
And if I can, I'll stop you there just for 1 second. These are I'm asking it like these are diagnosable things. These are not things
Yes.
like it's like concrete. Not
Yes.
We're taking our best guess.
If they would have done the correct tests, then they would have known, but they did not, even though we asked for these tests.
And I had a family member that had Guillain-Barré syndrome, but not
it's
not
a cousin to it. They're almost the same.
Because this is like when your own body starts attacking your own nervous system.
It's the same thing. But if you don't treat it, it can be. I mean, I don't know. Like they say with Guillain-Barré, it's like immediate, and I feel like Maddie's was pretty immediate, but maybe didn't get to the point where, because there was one kid that was in the hospital when she was in inpatient therapy, that had Guillain-Barré, and it got to the point where he couldn't breathe. Yeah. Hers, I guess, was more when it's more gradual, than it and chronic, then it's CIDP. But like the association for Guillain-Barré is the same. They're totally, it's the same thing.
And GBS, it's a known potential adverse reaction to viral infections and to jabs, like any jab, not just COVID. It's anything that enters your body can respond by attacking your nervous system and not the intruder. So you get it. When do you get the concrete definitive diagnosis?
It was we went there in June. He gave us, and I sent it to you, the preliminary diagnosis. And then once all the tests came back, I think it was in July, we got the formal diagnosis of the CIDP, small fiber neuropathy, and POTS due to the vaccine. And it says that in the diagnosis.
Where's Pfizer in all of this? Is this reported to Pfizer? Do they include this in their
They
final
know
report?
all of this. Nope. They had already reported everything. They reported Maddie's reaction as functional abdominal pain and paresthesia. So
Well,
functional abdominal pain is a stomach ache, and paresthesia is pins and needles, like when your arm falls asleep.
Functional abdominal pain.
Yeah. Pain,
That bit-
stomach ache, you can't explain.
Okay. When do you find out that that's the findings that they included for Maddie's event?
Whenever I read the EUA, I knew
and-
it was her. I knew it was her. They never told us.
And now this is something that I know because I've listened to other podcasts and I may have taken for granted, but you ultimately do find out Maddie got the actual jab and your other kid got
Lucas got
placebo.
the placebo.
And sorry, I didn't mean to be this. I forgot his
That's
name.
okay.
Lucas.
Yeah.
So you definitively know one got the real deal, the other one got the placebo.
And then my oldest did get one dose of the real thing. The one that had COVID at the same time.
Yeah, but they administered the real deal without waiting for the results to see that he had COVID when they administered that, and there's nothing negligent in that on its face. Okay, I'm sorry. So you get this diagnosis. You now know that Pfizer has included. They had disagreed with what the diagnosis was, and they put in functional.
They don't even care. They don't care. That we didn't get. So they put that in before we got. It took us forever to find a doctor to treat her, because once you have that in your charts, it's connected everywhere. And there's a whole Ohio coalition of all the hospitals in Ohio. So they all work together. So once in Cincinnati Children's is the premier hospital. So once we had that diagnosis from there, nobody else would even, like, we tried at Dayton Children's, and before we even walked in, like, our appointments lasted minutes. Like, they already had the diagnosis. It was already, they didn't even want to challenge it or know anything.
And now, knowing what we know today about external pressure being exercised on doctors, licensure threats, and whatever, and there's a big entity behind this. I don't know what relationship exists between Pfizer.
I should say one other thing, and I don't know if I sent you these, and I can. While Maddie was in the hospital in May, Brianne Dressen had reached out to me because they saw my story on Facebook, and she and a bunch of other people were being studied by the NIH, and she connected me with Dr. Avernath, who then talked to Maddie's neurologist at Cincinnati Children's, who at the time, he's like he actually was interested. He's like, I don't think this is functional neurologic disorder. Did a bunch of tests. They all came back abnormal. And then all of a sudden, he explained away the tests that were abnormal and said, this is functional neurologic disorder. The study was published, but it took like over a year to publish it. And I can send you that too. But so the NIH is well aware of Maddie as well. And I have emails.
They're well aware of her before the rollout. Not this is
that was in May. I'm trying to think of it. So
December, the rollout started December,
I think
2021, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, that was with adults. Oh wait, December 20. No, the kids. It was the EUA was approved in May because it was right around Maddie's birthday. Okay. It was right after the rollout, I think. She was in the hospital whenever the EUA was approved.
For children, for the jab.
For 12 to 15-year-olds, she was in the hospital when it was approved.
While they're saying it's safe and effective and encouraging people to get their kids jabbed.
Yep.
This is it's maddening. Like, this is like you'd want to be setting, not even, it's like in conjunction with the horror that you're living with your family unit. You're seeing them now roll this out, and you're like screaming into an abyss, and nobody is hearing.
And I'm not even telling you everything. Like, there's too much to even tell about what happened. Like, and we have so much data and recordings and emails, like, with all of this to back it up.
No, first of all, I've seen enough to feel comfortable that no one can say like, hey, I got anybody who says you're
We've
what's
done everything we can. If people even knew.
no, I
Like,
could.
yeah.
The detractors or people out there who want to write you off will say Munchausen by proxy. It's all whatever. Setting all that, I've seen enough to make sure that
Yeah.
that's not, I can feel comfortable with this. This happened to your daughter,
Mhm.
and while you're going through all of this, incurring I don't know how much in medical bills,
Mhm.
Pfizer not a peep, and they run ahead nonetheless, finalize the clinical trials with
Mhm.
children.
Mhm.
Safe and effective, write her off as a
Mhm.
tummy ache and a head
Mhm.
case, and you're left now with this reality of a family situation, and they're just running out and just sticking needles in as many arms as they can get.
Yep. And now there's more kids that are injured and killed. I mean, I know more parents than I want to know ever.
Did you know of anybody else in the trials? Did anyone else reach out to you, or are people
There's an adult that um, that did speak out, but no kids. No kids. But if you look in the EUA, there were 2 kids that were, I think they were taken out of the trial for psychological things. I guarantee you they were injured.
No, now that you know now that you know it's happened once, it's happened before, and if they've done it once, they've done it before, and they've done it to others. And we're dealing with, what was it, 2,000 kids, 1,000 getting the real thing.
Even if
One,
it was just her,
even if
1
it
in a
was just
thousand
her.
is not good odds. Not good.
Have you been in touch with any of the other families or who were involved in the children clinical trials?
None that were like, the only people that I know are the ones that were friends, and most of them actually got the placebo. Some of them did end up getting the actual vaccine, so none of them did have any like issues like Maddie did.
So what is the treatment? I can't remember the name of exactly what she suffered with her diagnosis, but what is the treatment? What's the long-term prognosis?
So she's, I mean, IVIG is, if she would have been given it right away, then this probably would have been resolved within a month. But now she's going to have it for, I mean, she's approved for a year. Um, I, I don't know how long she'll have to get it, but it has like started, like there were immediate improvements. She's had a lot of complications. So she got an infection. So first they couldn't access her veins. So she ended up having to get a Broviac, which is like a kind of like a port in your chest, but it's not like, it's one that's constant, like you don't have to access it. It just is sticking out of your chest. She got an infection like that was in her Broviac. She got sick. She was hospitalized. So they had to remove that. They put in a PICC line, and then they continued her IVIG, and she ended up, and she still has a blood clot that is wrapped around her PICC line. So after that happened, the doctor in New York was working with our local primary care, because you have to have somebody local since they're not, we're not in New York. She got uncomfortable, so we had to find a new local doctor, so there was a gap in her care. So she regressed because she stopped the IVIG, but it has started back up again. And I mean, it's working.
I want to
So it's
ask.
a combination of that and repairing the damage that's been done.
I
So
want to
we're
ask
still working with the naturopath.
Let me ask the question. You say the doctor got uncomfortable, and I don't want to get you in trouble, and I don't want to ask a question I shouldn't ask, but I'm going to ask it. Uncomfortable due to external pressure, licensing issues.
I think it was because of the infection in the blood clot. Like, it's not something that normally a family doctor is involved with. We couldn't get a local neurologist like at Children's because they won't admit that there's something wrong. So you have to have, for the care, I mean, there's blood tests that need to be done. There's a lot of care for, if you have a central line, like you have to have somebody local involved as well. So we do have somebody now that we're very confident in. And yeah.
Now I know you have lawyers involved, and I presume they've gone over the paperwork that you signed, but I presume you were forced to sign a waiver for any and all effects, secondary, whatever, assuming they assume no liability, full awareness of fact and law, yada yada. You're up.
You have to prove, what is it, ill intent, or I forget what it's called. You have to prove
I would say
that it was intentional.
gross
Yeah.
negligence.
Yes, yeah. Which I think there was, but it's not that simple. It doesn't matter.
We're going to get to a few. There's still some stuff.
The bigger thing for me is like stopping this. Not about getting us money. It's about stopping this from happening to more people. Like that's what I care about most. And my daughter getting better and being able to get her treatment without having to fight, like and search. And like it's been, if somebody has a kid that's this sick, you have coordinated care from a hospital where you don't have to, like, I have to coordinate everything. I have to do everything. I'm doing stuff that like people have no clue. That's why just beating me up doesn't, like, it's already stressful enough, like, and I already beat my, like, it's just, people have no clue. And if this happens to your kid after a booster, you're going to be in the same boat as me. You're going to be no better.
Well, though people don't necessarily appreciate that, like, whatever they think they're saying to hurt you, or these are thoughts that you have. I mean, it's an unimaginable situation in which you find yourself, and people lack empathy, they lack humanity to think that they're going to say something to you that you haven't already said to yourself at some point in this. The question was this. Sorry, the insult to the injury and all of this is that Pfizer not only has no interest in taking care of you, they have a vested interest in pretending that you don't exist anymore.
Oh, and yes. I post on their social media things all the time.
Any mainstream media? You've been on Fox News. When was the last time you were on Fox?
2 weeks ago on the weekend. That was on Fox and Friends. That was the second time, and I was on Tucker Carlson once, Newsmax. That's it. The only thing, NBC did an article that pretty much said that that it was not true. That was the only article that really was negative towards saying that this was not real. With Brandy, I forget her name. That was the only, like, nobody else has challenged it.
How is Maddie doing now? She's neurologically, I mean, like, brain-wise, intact?
Her brain works. She can communicate. She is resilient. She is somehow, like, if this would have been me at her age, I don't know how, like, she just knows how to adapt. She's figured out ways to make friends and communicate, using technology. She has a tutor that comes to our house. She's homebound is what they call it. Because she just can't go to school. It's too difficult. Her eyes were affected, like her vision. She can't write anymore. But slowly, a lot of that is coming back. Like today, she was able to actually unlatch her brake on the one side, which she has not been able to do on her wheelchair. Prior to the blood clot, she was able to transfer herself from her wheelchair to like her bed and stuff like that. But then she got the blood clot and that set her back. So the IVIG is working. It's just going to take a while. I mean, I know a lot of other people that are getting it. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't always work for everybody. Sometimes you have to do plasmapheresis and other things. The other part is just what's being put into her body. We have her on a new formula that's like real food. She's on supplements. Like I said, we still work with Dr. Ely, who's a naturopath as well. Because that is important. Like, I never realized the importance of that and what you put into your body, just how much that does affect you. So even like with the formulas that she was on before were not helping her.
I'm not sure that I missed anything that I intended. Is there anything that I did not ask you about that? You got lawyers involved. You wrote a letter to HHS. Is it HHS?
to the FDA. I've
Yeah.
written a letter, like I've submitted when they were getting, I think it was the approval for the 5 to 11-year-olds. I wrote a letter. I
I'm going to
submitted
ask.
something.
Just ask a stupid question. Did you write to Joe Biden? And this is not to get political, because maybe you should have written to Trump as well. Did you write to Trump? Did you write to Joe Biden? Did anybody in a position of power hear you, let alone whether or not they responded?
No, I
with
mean,
what-
the lawyers have written to the FDA, like not to, I'm sorry, Joe Biden, like that's a joke. I'm sorry.
No, I know.
I just like writing to him. Yeah, I mean,
there
I
are people who might
yes.
say like writing to Trump might be a joke also, because this was hailed as the massive success by jamming things through faster than science can move at the expense of the
I have
people.
not written to him. I mean, there's things that have been submitted to the FDA, NIH, CDC, from me and from lawyers and from other people. People have spoke about Maddie, like whenever they're doing the approvals for the 5 to 11 and then the younger kids, like they've been written to many times. They are well aware, 100%. They are 100. They know who Maddie is. I'll bet my life on it.
Well, they cannot not know. These were clinical trials done for what's just the most shocking thing is that these are the clinical stages. This is not just one in a million adverse events that can happen from any shot.
Right.
People don't understand. This can happen from any foreign body entering the body, any vaccine. Yep. But the fact that it occurred during the trials, which were rushed, which had the smallest is the word cohort, like it had a small group, and even if it's 1 in 1,000, 1 in 2,000, that's too much. What do you do? Like this is you seem to. I mean, I don't know how difficult this is to deal with. I mean, I can only imagine.
I mean, you have to still. We have 2 other kids. We have to work because we have to survive. I still work for full time, and so does my husband. I mean, we make it work, but I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm saying I have nothing left in me. I have none of, we have no life, but I don't expect to. My daughter doesn't have a life either. So, and yeah.
What do you do? I mean, advocacy, I mean, how loud are you screaming and who are you screaming at right now?
Right now, anybody that wants to interview or talk to me, I talk. It's exhausting. Like I said, I work a full-time job. I do that. I go on Twitter because I don't get banned on Twitter. Like it's hard to do anything anywhere else because you get shut down. Like if you can't post on Facebook, you have to be very careful. Instagram, any of the other platforms. YouTube, Twitter is the only place where I can. I mean, I look at my profile. I post stuff. I share stuff.
It is,
and I also talk to parents that have kids that are injured. People let me know. And it's for me. It's like your kid does not have functional neurologic disorder. They do not have psychological problems. Don't let them put your kid on any antidepressant. Don't let them put them on gabapentin or Lyrica. It will make them worse. Don't get any MRIs with contrast. The MRIs will most likely show nothing, and the contrast could potentially make them worse. Like once your body's in that state, like it can't detox toxic things, and all these pharmaceutical things that I'm talking about are toxic, and they can't get rid of them out of their body once their body's in the state it's in, which I did not know in the beginning. And they tried to explain away by functional neurologic disorder. So for me, it's that and to cut out just things that you don't realize. Cut out the one girl was having like psychotic episodes from M&Ms. The food dye in it was making her worse. Because she kept having these episodes. I'm like, what, is there something she's doing each night that's the same? She's like, well, she has M&Ms. I'm like, stop giving her M&Ms. And guess what? Yeah.
Do you have a Give, Send, Go or any crowdsourcing fundraising that you set up?
We have a Life Funder. We use that because We took forever to start one, and we've been fortunate with getting money there. So far, we've used it all, but we have pledged that if there's anything that we get beyond that, I don't know if you've heard of React 19. It was started by two people that were vaccine injured, and they help other vaccine injured people. So anything that we would make beyond that, and I'd say, hey, also look at React 19 because they're doing a lot, that it would go towards them. So.
Okay, good. What's your Twitter handle again?
Oh my gosh, you know what?
Forget it. I'm gonna put it up in the pinned comment afterwards.
Isn't that pretty bad? Yeah.
No, it's also it is not an intuitive one. Let me see here. I'll see if I've missed
I think it's
any.
SH to Gary 73 or something like that.
Yeah. So someone Mighty Pay in our locals community said, ask about a fundraiser or way to donate. Twitter has been a godsend. I get shut down on Facebook, says
Yes.
another. No, it's
Twitter is the only place you can post.
Stephanie, it is, or I don't even know if it's 1984. What it is now? You have been victimized, brutalized, and now you're being brutalized again by not just not having your story addressed by the people who did this, but silenced by the big tech that is in bed with it is an absolute nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. There's no other way to put it. Other than the resolve, are you a religious person?
Yes.
Good. I mean,
that's the only reason. Real quick story. The only reason that Maddie's story went out public is I posted stuff on my Facebook early on for prayers. My uncle asked me if I would make it public so that he could share it with his church so that they could pray. Because I know, like, having more, the more information you have, the better you can pray. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay. So I made it public, not thinking anything of it, and it went viral the next day. I did not. I did. God did this. I didn't. I can't take, like, God did it.
And now, I'm struggling to not get enraged, and also just to not be overwhelmed with anger and grief. People in the chat, you should know that there are bad people out there who are going to say bad things just because they can. Most of the people, Stephanie, are praying with you.
Yes.
I tell you, I'm not. I wish I could be a religious person. I'm not. I'm a spiritual person.
That's okay.
And I do believe.
My brother was like that. That's all good. I understand. It's being a good person is what really matters. I mean, you can be religious and not be a good person. That doesn't mean anything. Being human and a kind person is what matters.
And what can people do to help Maddie herself? I mean, so the prognosis is there is optimism, there is hope.
There is. I mean, our challenges are finding, now that we have the IVIG straightened out, it's like one thing at a time. I mean, she is going to need inpatient rehabilitation. It's finding a place that's going to take her. Like, it's just, everything's difficult. We do have a doctor's appointment tomorrow with the new, our second doctor's appointment with the doctor that is managing her IVIG. So I'm hoping from that we can make some progress on her physical therapy, and her goal is her brother graduates in May, and she's like, I am walking by then. She's like, I am not going there in a wheelchair and sitting up front. It'd be fantastic if we could make that happen. I don't know, but I mean, I think the IVIG is started again, which is a good thing. We got to get rid of this blood clot.
Does the blood clot require surgery, or is there a chemical way of breaking it up?
So she's on anticoagulants so that there aren't any more blood clots, but she just had an ultrasound on Friday, so we're waiting for the results. I'm pretty sure the blood clot's still there, and it's been over a month. So really they're going to have to take out the PIC, but she needs fluids every day, like IV fluids, because we can't get enough fluids in her through her pump, through her NG tube, which is a whole nother problem. She's had an NG tube since April of 2021. Those are supposed to be short-term solutions. She really shouldn't have had one for this long. There should be something else done, but yeah. So I I mean, it's like people I'll ask for help with doctors and people will reach out, but it's hard to sift through all the people. There's a lot of people that want to help, but they really can't help. And it's just, I don't know, pray, pray, or like just get the word out so more kids don't get injured and more people don't really just share this and be kind to people that are speaking out. Cause it's hard. That's really what I want.
Hard is it's an understatement. It's not, it's what you're going through is it can't be any harder. And people who think that they're making some point and whatever, in fact, like you say, Stephanie, it makes it harder for other parents of injured kids or injured family members to come out because they don't want the ridicule, they don't want the scorn, they don't want to be called anti-vaxxers. This is not something that goes away or that gets resolved with bullying or name calling. And if every one of us on earth was punished severely for a mistake that we made, but I say, but for the grace of, I'm not religious, but for the grace of God, we've all done things, and for the grace of God, it could have gone as bad. It could have been that 1 in a million bad things.
And a lot of times people do things not with ill intent. Like I thought I was doing the right thing with allowing them to protect. Like I thought, okay, they might potentially get it early. They'll be protected. They'll be helping, like for me,
Stephanie,
you only know what you know.
There are very few sincere people, good people who would think that you had any ill intent. It's very easy to say in retrospect, well, look what happened when it was not, like I say, like it wasn't a reasonable prospect for in the minds of most people. And it's just abject horror. It's abject insults to the injury that you've sustained. So if everybody, if nothing else comes out of this, it's going to be more people knowing about it, so that the next time someone runs a poll and they say, who's Maddie Garay, people are going to know of this, and it will empower other people to come forward. It will empower other people to speak. And and I don't know how much strength it takes and where you get your resolve from, Stephanie, but you've got it. And
Maddie.
It's okay. So I don't think I've missed any questions. And if I did, we'll do a follow-up in any event, and hopefully we're going to hear good news sooner than later. Stephanie, stick around. Like I always say, we'll say our proper goodbyes afterwards. Everyone in the chat, snip, clip, share away, let people know, and let people know. People are going to say, if you share this, you're spreading, anti-vax propaganda.
Anti-vax people don't, well, no. I'm afraid of that my kids will never get another vaccination, to be honest with you, but anti-vax people don't put their kids in trials, so you're not spreading anything but the truth.
It's not just that, I've been very vocal about exploring these issues. But for the grace of God, I got 2 shots back in August 2021, and I just lost my train of thought. Our kids have got their shots, but we were in a world where they called it a vaccine specifically so that it would hide the fact that it was an experimental shot, that they called it that on the NIH, of a technology that had never been used. Had they called it an experimental gene therapy jab, most people wouldn't have. And so they gave it a name that put it up on the pedestal with measles, mumps, rubella, tetanus, what's the other one I can't think of? Rabies. They gave it a name that gave it credibility, so that no one even had these second thoughts in the first place. And that's how they exploited people. And they're violating you after having exploited you and after having caused you harm, and make you fight for the dignity that you're entitled to as a human and as someone who did, put themselves out there for what was being, Stephanie, what irritates me is they could have just not done it and then just said they did it, and it would have been less disastrous, as opposed to doing it, seeing the results, and then writing them off after they've harmed actual humans.
Yeah.
I could go on for a while. I won't. I'll end up saying something that I'll regret. Okay. Thank you, everybody out there. You know what to do. Snip, clip, share away. Barnes and I will be live tomorrow night. Stephanie, thank you. And thank you for having the courage to speak out, despite what people just behind their keyboards like to say for the sake of it. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Everybody out there, have a good weekend. See you later.